One whispered question changed everything, but the answer would cost them more than they ever imagined. Ryan never wanted to go to that conference. He sat in his car outside the hotel for a good 10 minutes, debating whether he should just drive home and skip the whole thing. These networking events were always the same. Fake smiles, business cards nobody would ever look at again, and conversations that felt more like job interviews than actual human interaction. But his boss had been pretty clear. Show up or don't bother coming to work on Monday. So Ryan grabbed his jacket from the back seat and headed inside. The conference hall was exactly what he expected. Too many people packed into one space, all wearing similar dark suits and forced enthusiasm. He made his way to the registration desk, got his name tag, and immediately felt that sinking feeling in his stomach. He'd be stuck here for at least 3 hours. The buffet table seemed like a safe place to hide for a while. At least if he was eating, people wouldn't try to talk to him. Ryan reached for one of those fancy little appetizers when someone else's hand went for the same one. Their fingers brushed against each other and he pulled back. "Sorry, you go ahead," he said, looking up. That's when he saw her. She had this presence about her that was hard to describe. Not loud or flashy, just confident in a way that made everyone else in the room seem like they were trying too hard. She smiled at him, and it wasn't one of those professional networking smiles. It was real. "These look terrible anyway," she said, picking up the appetizer and examining it like it was some kind of science experiment. "I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be salmon, but it tastes like cardboard wrapped in sadness." Ryan laughed. Actually laughed. "That hadn't happened all day. That bad?" he asked. "Worse. But I'm still going to eat it because I skipped lunch and I'm starving." She popped it in her mouth and made an exaggerated face of regret. "Yep, confirmed. Cardboard." They ended up standing by that buffet table for the next 20 minutes just talking. Her name was Victoria, and she ran her own business. Something about digital consulting. Though Ryan honestly wasn't paying that much attention to what she did, he was more interested in how she talked about it. Like she actually cared, like it meant something beyond just making money. "So what brings you to this thrilling event?" Victoria asked, grabbing a napkin to wipe her hands. "My boss threatened to fire me if I didn't show up," Ryan admitted. "What about you?" "I'm supposed to be scouting potential partnerships. But honestly, I've been here for 2 hours and everyone sounds exactly the same. It's like they all went to the same school of boring business talk." She looked around the room with this expression that was half amusement, half disappointment. "You're the first person who said anything interesting." "I haven't said anything interesting yet," Ryan pointed out. "Exactly. That's what makes you interesting. You're not trying so hard." They moved away from the buffet table when the crowd started getting too thick, found a quieter corner near some decorative plants that looked just as tired of the event as Ryan felt. The conversation shifted from surface-level small talk to something deeper. Victoria mentioned she'd been divorced for about a year, said it so casually like she was talking about the weather. "That must have been rough," Ryan said. "It was necessary," Victoria replied. "Sometimes you realize you married someone because you thought you should, not because you actually wanted to spend your life with them." Took me 5 years to figure that out. Ryan understood that more than she knew. His own divorce had been finalized 8 months ago. He'd spent most of that time convincing himself he was fine, that he'd moved on. But standing here talking to Victoria, he realized how lonely he'd actually been. "I get it," he said quietly. "Going through something similar myself." Victoria's expression softened. "Then you know. Everyone thinks divorce is this dramatic explosion. But sometimes it's just this quiet realization that you're already living separate lives. The paperwork is just making it official." They talked about everything after that. Their jobs, sure, but also their doubts about where their careers were heading. The pressure to have everything figured out by their 30s. The weird feeling of starting over when everyone else seemed to be settled. It was the kind of conversation Ryan used to have with close friends, not someone he just met an hour ago. The conference started wrapping up around them. People were gathering their things, exchanging final business cards, making plans they probably wouldn't follow through on. Victoria checked her phone and sighed. "I should probably go," she said. But she didn't move. "Yeah, me too," Ryan replied, also not moving. They stood there for another moment, neither of them wanting to be the first to leave. Then Victoria smiled, that same genuine smile from earlier. "There's a bar in this hotel. Not the main one where everyone from this event is going. A quieter one on the 3rd floor. If you're interested in continuing this conversation, I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Ryan nodded, trying to play it cool even though his heart was doing something weird in his chest. I'll see you there. He watched her walk away, then spent the next 5 minutes wondering if he'd imagined that whole interaction. But 15 minutes later, there he was, sitting at a small table in a dimly lit hotel bar, and there was Victoria, sliding into the seat across from him. The bar was perfect. Quiet enough to hear each other, but not so empty that it felt awkward. They ordered drinks and picked up their conversation like no time had passed. Ryan found himself talking about things he hadn't told anyone. His fear that he'd wasted his 20s in a relationship that was never going to work. His worry that he didn't actually know what he wanted from life. Victoria listened in a way that made him feel heard, not judged. When she spoke about her own struggles with letting people in after her divorce, Ryan felt like she was describing exactly what he'd been feeling. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said, leaning forward slightly. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I almost didn't come talk to you at that buffet table. I saw you standing there looking like you wanted to be anywhere else, and I thought, that's someone who gets it. But then I second-guessed myself. Thought maybe you wanted to be left alone." "I'm glad you didn't leave me alone," Ryan said honestly. "Me too." Victoria took a sip of her drink, her eyes never leaving his. There was something electric in the air between them. Something Ryan hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The conversation continued, getting more personal, more honest. They talked about their fears and their hopes, about feeling lost and trying to find their way, about the loneliness of going through major life changes while everyone around them seemed to have it all figured out. At some point, Victoria's knee brushed against Ryan's under the table. Neither of them moved away. The accidental touch became intentional, and suddenly the air felt different. Charged. Victoria leaned in even closer. Close enough that Ryan could smell her perfume. "Something subtle and expensive. Can I ask you something?" she whispered, her voice so low that Ryan had to lean in to hear her. "Sure." Her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made Ryan's breath catch. She had this slight smile, like she was about to share a secret that only the two of them would ever know. "You want to know if I'm not wearing anything underneath?" she whispered. The question hit Ryan like a wave. His mind went blank for a second, trying to process what she'd just said. Was she serious? Was she testing him? Flirting, both? He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Victoria's smile widened slightly, clearly enjoying his reaction. Before Ryan could figure out what to say, her phone buzzed loudly on the table. She glanced at it and her whole expression changed. "I have to take this," she said, the playful tone gone, replaced by something more serious. "It's about a deal I've been working on for months." She stood up, phone already to her ear, and walked toward the bar's exit. But before she disappeared, she turned back and looked at Ryan. That mysterious smile returned just for a second, and then she was gone. Ryan sat there alone, his drink still half full, his mind racing. What just happened? Was she coming back? Should he wait? What was he supposed to do with that question she'd asked? He waited for 20 minutes, but Victoria didn't return. Eventually, Ryan paid for both their drinks and headed to his car, replaying the entire evening in his head. That question kept echoing, the way she'd whispered it, the look in her eyes. He didn't even know her last name, didn't have her number. For all he knew, he'd never see her again, and somehow that made the whole thing even more intense, more real. Ryan drove home in a daze, already wondering if he'd just experienced something extraordinary or if he'd completely misread the entire situation. 3 weeks passed and Ryan couldn't get that night out of his head. He'd replayed the conversation with Victoria 1,000 times. Sometimes he convinced himself it had all been innocent flirting. Other times he was sure there had been something deeper happening between them. He thought about trying to find her online. How hard could it be? She'd mentioned her company name. But every time he opened his laptop to search for her, he stopped himself. It felt desperate, creepy even. If she'd wanted him to have her contact information, she would have given it to him. So Ryan tried to move on. Threw himself into work, went to the gym more, agreed to go out with friends when they invited him, even though he usually preferred staying home. He was doing okay. Not great, but okay. Then his boss called him into her office on a Tuesday morning. "We just landed a new client," she said, looking pleased. "Big project?" They specifically requested someone with your background. I'm putting you on lead." Ryan nodded, trying to look enthusiastic. "Another project. Another client. Same routine?" "First meeting is this afternoon at their office," his boss continued, sliding a folder across the desk. "Everything you need is in there. Address, parking info, background on the company. The CEO wants to be hands-on with this project, so you'll be working directly with her." "Sounds good," Ryan said, taking the folder. He spent the morning preparing, reviewing the client's website and previous work. The company did digital consulting, helping businesses modernize their operations. Solid reputation, good reviews. The CEO's photo on the website showed a professional woman in her 30s, but the image was small and slightly blurry. Ryan arrived at the client's office 15 minutes early. The receptionist directed him to a conference room on the second floor. He set up his laptop and notes, going over his presentation one more time. The door opened behind him. "Sorry I'm late," a familiar voice said. "Traffic was worse than I expected." Ryan turned around and froze. Standing in the doorway, looking just as shocked as he felt, was Victoria. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria recovered first, her expression shifting from surprise to something more controlled. "Professional." "Ryan," she said, and hearing his name in her voice after 3 weeks did something to his chest. "Victoria, I didn't know you were the CEO. And I didn't know you were the consultant my team hired." She closed the door behind her and moved to the opposite end of the conference table, kept distance between them. "This is unexpected." "Yeah," Ryan agreed, his mind still catching up to the situation. Unexpected is one word for it. They stood there in awkward silence. All that chemistry from the bar, all those personal conversations suddenly felt huge and complicated. They weren't just two people who'd connected at a random event anymore. They were professional colleagues about to work together on a major project. Victoria sat down and opened her laptop, shifting into business mode. "We should probably address this," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "What happened 3 weeks ago?" "Okay," Ryan said carefully. "I had fun talking to you. I don't want to pretend I didn't. But this is a professional situation now." She finally looked at him, her expression serious. "I need this project to go well. My company is depending on it. So whatever else might have been happening between us that night, it needs to stay in the past. Can you do that?" Part of Ryan wanted to argue, to ask about that question she'd whispered, to understand why she'd left so suddenly and never came back. But she was right. This was business now. "Of course," he said, opening his laptop. "Professional." "Got it." The meeting proceeded normally after that. They discussed the project scope, timelines, deliverables. Victoria was impressive in this setting. Sharp and decisive. She asked the right questions and pushed back when something didn't make sense. Ryan found himself respecting her even more than he had at the bar. Over the next several days, they fell into a working rhythm. Email exchanges, conference calls, in-person meetings where they stuck to the agenda and kept things strictly professional. But there were moments, small ones, when their eyes would meet across the table and Ryan knew they were both remembering that night. The conversation, the connection, that whispered question. The project hit a snag in the second week, a technical issue that none of Victoria's team could solve. They were on a tight deadline, and losing even a few days could derail everything. Ryan found himself staying late at Victoria's office, working alongside her team to find a solution. On the third late night, everyone else had gone home. Just Ryan and Victoria remained, hunched over laptops, surrounded by empty coffee cups and takeout containers. "This isn't working," Victoria said, rubbing her eyes. "We're missing something." Ryan leaned back in his chair, exhausted. "Maybe we're overthinking it." "Story of my life," Victoria muttered. She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time since that conference room reunion. "Can I be honest with you? Please. I've been freaking out since you walked into that meeting." She closed her laptop. "Not about the project. About seeing you again. I thought I'd never see you again, and part of me was okay with that. It was just one night, one conversation. But then there you were, and all I could think about was that bar and how easy it was to talk to you." Ryan's heart started beating faster. "I thought about you too, more than I probably should have." "That question I asked you," Victoria said quietly, "at the bar. I probably shouldn't have said it. It was bold. Maybe too bold. I have this problem where I push boundaries to see if people can handle me. Most can't. I didn't mind, Ryan admitted. I could tell. Victoria smiled slightly. That's what scared me. When my phone rang and I had to take that call, I almost came back. But then I thought, this is too fast. Too intense. I just got divorced. You're clearly going through your own stuff. Getting involved would be messy. So you decided not to come back. I decided not to complicate both our lives. Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. And then the universe decided to complicate them anyway by making us work together. Ryan joined her at the window. They stood side by side, not quite touching, looking out at the same view. What do we do now? He asked. I don't know, Victoria said honestly. My rule is no mixing business with personal life. I learned that lesson the hard way. My ex and I started our first company together. When the marriage ended, everything got complicated. I promised myself I'd never blur those lines again. That's a good rule, Ryan agreed, even though every part of him wanted to reach out and touch her hand. It is, Victoria said, but it's also making me miserable right now. They turned to face each other at the same time. The space between them felt charged, just like it had at the bar. But now there was something else too. History, understanding. 3 weeks of thinking about each other and wondering what if. We should probably get back to work, Victoria said. But she didn't move. Probably, Ryan agreed. Also not moving. This deadline isn't going to meet itself, she added. Definitely not. Neither of them moved. They just stood there looking at each other, the tension building with every second. Victoria bit her lip, clearly debating something internally. Would it be completely inappropriate if I kissed you right now? She asked, Ryan's breath caught. Extremely inappropriate. That's what I thought. Victoria took a small step closer. You should probably stop me then. Probably, Ryan said, but he closed the distance between them instead. The kiss was everything the moment at the bar had promised. Intense and real and right in a way that made Ryan forget every reason why this was a bad idea. Victoria's hands were in his hair and his were on her waist, and the whole world narrowed down to just this, just them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. We have a problem, she whispered. Big problem. Ryan agreed. This can't happen. Not while we're working together. Not when my company's reputation is on the line. I know. But I really want it to happen, Victoria admitted. Me too. They stood there for another moment, trying to figure out what to do. Then Victoria's phone rang, shattering the moment. She looked at the screen and her expression changed completely. All the warmth drained from her face. I have to take this, she said, stepping away from Ryan. You should go. We'll figure out the project tomorrow. Victoria, what's wrong? Just go, please, she said, and there was something in her voice. Fear, maybe. Or panic. Ryan gathered his things, confused and concerned. As he left, he could hear Victoria on the phone, her voice low and tense. Whatever that call was about, it wasn't good. He drove home with more questions than answers. What was that phone call? Why had Victoria suddenly shut down? And how were they supposed to work together now after that kiss, after admitting they wanted each other? Ryan had a feeling things were about to get a lot more complicated. Ryan barely slept that night. He kept replaying that kiss, the way Victoria had suddenly changed when her phone rang, the fear in her voice. He texted her the next morning asking if everything was okay. No response. Sent an email about the project, nothing. By afternoon, he was worried enough to drive to her office. The receptionist informed him that Victoria wasn't in. Hadn't been in all day. No explanation given. Can you tell her I stopped by? Ryan asked. Of course, the receptionist said, but her smile seemed forced, like she knew something she wasn't allowed to share. Ryan tried calling. Straight to voicemail. He told himself he was overreacting. She was probably just dealing with whatever that phone call had been about. She'd reach out when she was ready. But 3 days passed with complete silence. The project they'd been working on had a deadline. Ryan did what he could on his end, but he needed Victoria's input to move forward. His boss started asking questions. The client's team seemed confused about the delays. And still, Victoria remained unreachable. On the 4th day, Ryan decided enough was enough. He drove to Victoria's office after hours, hoping he might catch her working late like she usually did. The building was mostly empty, but when he reached her floor, he saw light coming from under her office door. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again, louder this time. Victoria, I know you're in there. I can see the light. I'm not leaving until we talk. The door opened slowly. Victoria looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, still wearing what looked like yesterday's clothes. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. You've been ignoring me for 4 days. The project is stalling. Your team is worried about you. Ryan stepped closer. I'm worried about you. What's going on? Victoria hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Her office was a mess. Papers everywhere. Coffee cups littering her desk. Her laptop screen showed spreadsheets and documents, all marked with timestamps from the middle of the night. I'm dealing with something, she said, closing the door. Something complicated. Obviously. Want to tell me what it is? Victoria sat down at her desk and put her head in her hands. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. When she finally looked up, Ryan could see tears in her eyes. My business partner, she started, her voice shaking slightly. The one I started this company with 5 years ago. We've been having disagreements for a while now. About money. About the direction of the company. But I thought we were handling it professionally. What happened? Ryan asked, sitting across from her. That phone call the other night. It was from our accountant. He found some irregularities in our finances. Money missing from client accounts. Payments that don't add up. And all the evidence points to me. Ryan's stomach dropped. What do you mean, points to you? Someone's been moving money around, hiding transactions, and they've made it look like I'm the one doing it. Victoria's hands were shaking. My partner called me the next morning. Said he was bringing in investigators. That I needed to step back from all projects until this was resolved. But you didn't do it, Ryan said. It wasn't a question. Of course I didn't do it. But right now, on paper, I'm the guilty one. She gestured at her laptop. I've been going through everything. Every transaction, every account. Trying to figure out what happened and how to prove I'm innocent. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're working on a project for my company. If word gets out that I'm under investigation, we could lose everything. Our reputation, our clients, everything I've built. Victoria wiped her eyes. And because I was trying to protect you. The less you know, the better. Ryan stood up and walked around the desk. He pulled up a chair next to Victoria and looked at her laptop screen. Show me, he said. Ryan, you can't get involved in this. Too late. I'm already involved. Now show me what you found. Victoria hesitated, then started walking him through the financial documents. It was complicated, but Ryan had enough business background to understand the basics. Money had been moved between accounts in ways that looked legitimate on the surface, but didn't make sense when you dug deeper. They worked through the night. Ryan asking questions, Victoria explaining the company's financial structure. Around 3 a.m, Ryan noticed something. These transfers, he said, pointing at the screen. They all happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? Yeah, so? Those are the days you're usually out of the office. At client meetings or conferences. Ryan pulled up another document. And these authorization codes. They're using your credentials, but the IP addresses don't match your usual devices. Victoria leaned forward, suddenly energized. You're right. I never noticed that. How did you see that? Fresh eyes, Ryan said. You've been staring at this for days. Sometimes you need someone else to spot the patterns. They kept digging. By the time the sun started coming up, they'd found a trail. Small inconsistencies that individually meant nothing but together painted a picture. Someone was using Victoria's access to steal from the company, and they'd been careful to do it when she couldn't easily provide an alibi. It's my partner, Victoria said, the realization hitting her. He's the only other person with high-level access. He's been setting me up. Why would he do that? Because I told him no. Victoria closed her laptop and rubbed her face. 2 months ago, he wanted to sell the company. Some big corporation made an offer. Good money. But this company is my life. I built it from nothing. I told him I wouldn't agree to the sale. So he decided to force you out, Ryan finished. And if I'm under investigation for embezzlement, I lose everything. My reputation, my stake in the company. He can sell without me and pocket the money. Victoria looked at Ryan. I sound paranoid, don't I? You sound like someone who's figuring out the truth. They spent the next several hours organizing everything they'd found. Building a timeline, documenting the evidence. It wasn't enough to prove Victoria's innocence conclusively, but it was enough to raise serious questions about her partner's role. We need to take this to someone, Ryan said. A lawyer, maybe. Or the police, I know. I'm just scared. Victoria stood up and stretched. What if it's not enough? What if he's been more careful than we think and this all backfires? Then we find more evidence. Ryan stood too, moving closer to her. But you can't just sit here and let him destroy everything you've worked for. Victoria looked up at him. Why are you helping me? You barely know me. This could blow back on you too if it goes wrong. Because someone should have your back right now, and because I know you didn't do this. Ryan reached out and took her hand. And maybe because I care about you more than I probably should, considering we've only actually spent a few nights together. That kiss wasn't exactly professional, Victoria said with a small smile. Definitely violated about 100 workplace ethics rules, Ryan agreed. We should probably not do it again, Victoria said, but she was moving closer to him as she spoke. Absolutely not. Terrible idea. They kissed again, and this time it was different. Less urgent, more tender. Like they were acknowledging that whatever was happening between them was real and complicated, and maybe worth the risk. When they pulled apart, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression darkened. It's my partner. He wants to meet this afternoon. Says the investigators have finished their preliminary review. She looked at Ryan. This is it. Either I confront him with what we found or I let him destroy me. You confront him, Ryan said firmly, and you don't go alone. I'm coming with you. Ryan, you don't have to do that, I know. I'm doing it anyway. Victoria nodded, squeezing his hand. Okay, but if this goes bad, if he has more evidence than we think, I need you to walk away. Don't let him drag you down with me. Not happening, Ryan said. We're in this together now. They spent the rest of the morning preparing, going over their evidence one more time, running through possible scenarios. Victoria called her lawyer and filled them in. The lawyer advised caution, but agreed that what they'd found was significant. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Victoria's office. Ryan waited with her, both of them nervous but determined. When Victoria's partner arrived, he wasn't alone. He'd brought the investigators and a lawyer of his own. This won't take long, her partner said, his voice cold. The evidence is pretty clear. You've been stealing from the company, Victoria. The investigators found dozens of unauthorized transfers. Transfers made using my credentials while I was out of the office, Victoria replied, her voice steady. Transfers that originated from IP addresses I've never used. Isn't that interesting? Her partner's expression flickered for just a second. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that someone with high-level access has been framing me, and I think we both know who that someone is. Victoria slid a folder across the table. This is everything we found. Patterns, timelines, technical evidence. Maybe the investigators would like to take a look at your accounts too. The room went silent. Her partner opened the folder, his face getting redder as he read through the documents. Finally, he looked up at his lawyer, who whispered something in his ear. This proves nothing, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Maybe not, but it's enough to make everyone in this room start asking questions. And once people start digging into your finances, who knows what they'll find? Victoria leaned forward. But I don't want to take time, Ryan admitted. I want to see where this goes, even though it's messy and complicated and probably a terrible idea. Victoria smiled. Me too, but I need to focus on fixing my company first. Getting everything back on track. That has to be my priority. I understand. But maybe, Victoria said, moving closer again. Once things settle down, we could try this for real. Not as colleagues, not in the middle of a crisis. Just as two people who can't seem to stop thinking about each other. I'd like that, Ryan said. They kissed one more time, both knowing they were saying goodbye for now, but also promising something for later. When Ryan finally left Victoria's office, he felt both sad and hopeful. They'd survived something intense together. Maybe that meant they could survive anything. 2 weeks passed without contact. Ryan told himself it was for the best. Victoria needed space to deal with her business situation, and he needed to focus on his own work. The project they'd been collaborating on had been reassigned to someone else in Victoria's company. Clean break. Professional closure. Except Ryan couldn't stop thinking about her. He followed the news about her company online. There were articles about the investigation, speculation about what had really happened. Victoria's partner had resigned, and there were rumors of criminal charges being filed. Victoria herself stayed out of the public eye, letting her lawyers handle the media. Ryan wanted to reach out, check on her, make sure she was okay. But every time he picked up his phone, he stopped himself. She'd said she needed to focus on her company. He had to respect that. Then on a Friday afternoon, Ryan's boss called him into her office again. "We have a situation," she said, looking uncomfortable. "That client you were working with. Victoria's company. They're claiming we didn't fulfill our contract obligations." Ryan's stomach sank. "What?" "They're saying the project was never completed properly. That there were major issues we failed to address. They're demanding a refund and threatening to file a complaint with the business bureau." "That's not true," Ryan said immediately. "We did everything they asked for. The project was on track before they reassigned it internally." "I believe you. But they have documentation suggesting otherwise. Emails, project notes, all pointing to incomplete work and missed deadlines." His boss slid a folder across her desk. "I need you to go through everything. Find proof that we did our job, because if we can't, this could seriously damage our reputation." Ryan took the folder back to his desk and started reading. His confusion quickly turned to anger. Someone had altered the project timeline, made it look like they'd missed deadlines that didn't exist, created fake email chains suggesting Ryan had dropped the ball. This was Victoria's former partner. It had to be. He was still trying to destroy her company, and now he was going after anyone associated with Victoria, including Ryan's firm. Ryan tried calling Victoria, no answer. Sent multiple emails, nothing. He even drove to her office, but the receptionist said she wasn't available. For 3 days, Ryan dug through every piece of documentation he had, found the original project scope, the real timelines, proof that they'd met every milestone. But someone on Victoria's end would need to verify it, and without Victoria's cooperation, his evidence meant nothing. On the 4th day, Ryan was at his desk, frustrated and running out of options when Victoria finally called. "I know what you're thinking," she said before he could speak. "That I betrayed you, that I'm part of this fake complaint against your company." "Are you?" Ryan asked, keeping his voice neutral even though he was hurt. "No, God, no." "Ryan, I just found out about this today. I've been completely shut out of the operational side of my company while the investigation continues. My former partner convinced the board to remove me temporarily. He's been running things, and apparently one of the things he's been doing is sabotaging you." "Why?" "Because you helped me. Because he knows you found evidence against him. This is retaliation." Victoria's voice was shaking with anger. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to drag you into this mess." "What do we do?" Ryan asked. "I'm fighting to get back into my company. My lawyer thinks we have a good case, but it's going to take time, and time is something you don't have right now." Victoria paused. "I have copies of everything. The real project documents, the actual timelines. I can get them to you, but it has to be quiet. My former partner has eyes on everything I do." They arranged to meet that night at a coffee shop across town, somewhere neutral where no one would recognize them. Ryan got there first and found a corner table. When Victoria walked in 20 minutes later, he barely recognized her. She looked thin, tired, like the stress was physically eating her alive. "You look terrible," he said as she sat down. "Thanks. You really know how to make a girl feel special." But Victoria smiled slightly.